for a while, the Disney 2D animation studio was shut down. This is because the last few movies that were made were not huge financial successes. Half of them were even critical successes. So after a long time away, Disney decided to finally return to its roots. Go back to the fairy tales, go back to the happily ever afters, go back to the magical stuff. This is where The Princess and the Frog comes in. Let me tell you, I was excited to see an animated 2D Disney film on the big screen again. And not just a satire one, I mean a real one. And personally, in my opinion, it didn't disappoint. Okay, story. You got a young woman named Tiana. She has a dream of opening her own restaurant. After her father passes away, I guess some Disney traditions never do truly die, she works her butt off to save as much money as she can. While that's going on, a prince from a faraway land named Prince Naveen comes into town. His parents cut off his finances because he's too much of a party animal, but then he comes across the Shadow Man. He tricks Naveen into having him agree to have his soul be put into a frog, while his assistant would take on the appearance of the prince and also work for the Shadow Man. At a costume party, Naveen confuses Tiana for a princess and asks her to kiss him. She agrees, hoping that his riches will help keep her restaurant open, but seeing how she wasn't a true princess, she gets turned into a frog too. And the rest of the movie is them trying to figure out how to lift the curse and how to stop the evil Shadow Man. Let's look at our characters. Tiana is probably the best female lead since Belle. She's a fast thinker, she's positive, and she's a workaholic. God, never thought you'd see that in a Disney princess, would ya? The prince is also a lot of fun. He's full of himself, but he's also got a lot of innocence to him. Tiana's best friend is fucking hilarious. I haven't seen a Disney character this funny in a long time.
Prince Naveen.
Prince Naveen of Meldonia is coming to New Orleans. Oh, Winnie the bee's knees. Ooh, tell her what you did, Big Daddy. Tell her.
Every second she is on screen, she just cracks me up. The villain is also a lot of fun. The fact that he's into voodoo allows for a lot of creative visuals and a lot of great possibilities, and they take advantage of them all. And the rest of the side characters are also very memorable. You got an alligator who wants to be a musician, a redneck firefly who thinks he's in love with a star in the sky, and a witch doctor who always has the answer to every question. So, okay, this film sounds about as good as the classic traditional great Disney movies. What could possibly go wrong with it? Well, there's only one problem with the movie, and sadly, it's kind of a big one. The story. It's not that it's bad, it's just a little too complicated. I mean, okay, I told you the basics, but I didn't even tell you about the fact that, the Shadow Man has a deal with the underworld so that he can take control of the town. But in order to take control of the town, he has to have the guy who looks like the prince marry the daughter of the mayor of the town. But in order to do that, they constantly need the blood of the frog prince to constantly give to that guy, or else his disguise will fade away. But it turns out the prince has to be kissed by the daughter of the mayor because the mayor always appoints himself the king of the parade, which technically makes her a princess, but that has to be done before midnight on this certain day. But on top of that, you also have to have the two main characters fall in love with each other while they're discovering how to fix their own faults as well as each other's. Oh, and did I mention that there's also a totally unnecessary death and a totally goofy, silly funeral scene that'll either make you laugh or cry or both? Oh my god, it's too much. I always said that this should have been called Loophole, the movie, because that's what it always seems like. Every second they're trying to look for a new loophole to get around something. Now, is it a major problem? I guess not, because you're constantly guessing what's gonna happen. But one of the charms of movies like The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and so forth is that the stories were always very flowing. They knew exactly how much to give to the characters and exactly how much to give to the details. This movie has way too many details going on. But like I said, it's not that bad, it's just not as good as the other Disney flicks had it put together. Yes, the songs are Randy Newman's songs, and to be fair, two of them are pretty good. Friends on the Other Side is a great villain song, and Almost There actually has a very memorable, nice beat to it. The others, I don't remember them, and again, I guess that is a problem with the movie. But again, to the movie's credit, it does take place in New Orleans, and at least the musical style does match, even if it's not all memorable. I guess before I wrap up, I should talk about some of the controversy that surrounded this movie. Of course, Tiana was the first black princess, and there was a lot of talk about the fact that originally she was supposed to be a chambermaid. They changed it and made her a waitress, but that caused a lot of uproar too. Oh, it's changing history. Oh, it's changing the way things were back then. Well, you know what? There's a fucking talking frog. I think we'll live. Yeah, it's changing things, but you know what? We're always gonna have reminders of how things really were. This is a fairy tale. Let the kids have their fairy tale. On top of that, there's also controversy about why the film didn't do as well as Disney was hoping. Now, it didn't bomb, let me clarify that, but it wasn't the gigantic hit they were hoping for. Was it racism? Was the world just not ready for a black princess yet? I guess it could be, but I have my own theory. I think it is the prejudice, but it's not against black people. It's against hand-drawn films. It's been a while since one has been marketed to both adults and kids, and let's be honest, this is still a family picture. And the majority of family pictures coming out nowadays are either live action or 3D. Personally, I think a lot of adults still see hand-drawn films as kids' stuff. Now, it could get people in the seats if it was really doing something new like The Little Mermaid, or just did it spectacularly like Beauty and the Beast. And to be fair, even though I like this film, it really didn't. It updated the fairy tale very nicely and very cleverly, but the problems with the story do hold it back from being anything spectacular. And like I said before, only a few of the Randy Newman songs are memorable. There's no Be Our Guest in there. So that's my theory. But to be honest, it still made money. I'd be more concerned if nobody saw it. But you know what? People did. Was it a ton of them? No, but at the same time, a lot of the past Disney 2D animated films didn't have a ton of people looking at them, and nobody screamed racism at that. But I don't know all the people in the world, so it's anybody's guess. It's just a theory. On the whole, though, I really enjoy this one. I felt just like I was seeing Little Mermaid or Beauty and the Beast again. It was great to see it on the big screen, it was great to see these characters, and I had a lot of fun watching it. The animation's great, the colors are great, the characters are great. I enjoyed watching it, and I know I'll be seeing it a few more times in the future. This is the other animated Disney flick that I'm sort of gonna cheat on, Tangled. I know technically it's a 3D animated movie, but let's be honest, it's a 2D film in 3D's clothing. The characters are designed like 2D animation, the backgrounds look like something out of 2D animation. The story is very reminiscent of the traditional Disney fairy tales, it's basically a 2D animated flick. So I'll bend the rules a little bit and review this one as well. And I also feel it a little bit necessary to compare it to the last 2D animated film, The Princess and the Frog. I know that's probably not fair to the movie, but at the same time, one film only did okay and one film did a lot better. And this was the one that did a lot better. And seeing how they came out back to back, I guess it does make sense to see why one did better than the other. So let's talk about the absolute best aspect of the film, the story. And it's rare that I say that, but the story to this film is brilliant. This is the classic retelling of a fairy tale that Disney used to do best. It's not exactly like the original, but the changes are not only incredibly creative, but half the time, they're improvements. It transitions the story into film perfectly. Okay, so what is it? Apparently there's this magic flower that gives eternal youth. But it only seems to do it when you sing a certain song that this witch figured out. So the witch has been using the flower for years, that is until the queen of the land gets incredibly sick. So the flower is found and used to keep her alive, but the witch loses her ability to keep young. It seems the flower has been crushed down to herbs and has now been passed on to the queen's daughter, Rapunzel. And the quote-unquote flower power actually seems to be in her hair. So the witch kidnaps Rapunzel when she's just a baby and uses the power of her hair to grow younger. And seeing how she wants to live longer and longer, she grows the hair longer and longer. All throughout this introduction, I was shouting, brilliant, brilliant, brilliant! This is a fantastic setup! There's a reason for the hair to grow long. There's a reason for her to be in a tower. There's a reason to incorporate music into this. It was just wonderful! And on top of that, the setup for the rest of the story is actually pretty good too. Rapunzel grows up into a teenager, of course, under the care of her controlling witch mother. But when a famous thief enters her tower, she knocks him out and tries to get some information out of him. He agrees that if she lets him go, he'll lead her to this ceremony that seems to take place every year on her birthday. This ceremony, it turns out, is raising a bunch of lanterns in the hope that someday she will find it and return back home. She agrees, and from here on in, it's pretty much the adventure you think it'd be. There's sword fighting, horse riding, dancing, singing, romances, evildoers, all the stuff you'd expect from Disney. So, just from that ingenious setup, you'd expect this to be maybe one of the top 5 Disney films of all time, right? Well, there are some problems. One is the voice acting. And don't get me wrong, it's not terrible, it's not even that bad, I just can't find myself getting that invested in these voices. As soon as I heard Rapunzel's voice, I remember thinking to myself, oh, that's a celebrity voice. And wouldn't you know it, it was. And as soon as I heard the thief's voice, I remember thinking, hey, that sounds like a guy trying to do a thief's voice, but not actually a thief. And that's my major problem with this movie. As brilliant as the setup is, everything feels like they're trying to convey that traditional Disney film. Sometimes it works. But other times, much like Hunchback, it feels pretty forced. Like the musical segments, they just sort of come out of nowhere. They feel very rushed, and I don't feel like it really matches the movie. I mean, granted, I'm not a big fan of Randy Newman, but it matched in The Princess and the Frog. It was New Orleans. It made sense to have that kind of music. Here, this sort of pop guitar slash Broadway slash Billboard's hit sound, I don't know, it seems a little out of place. And honestly, those two things are my only problem, but they're kind of a big problem. Princess and the Frog, it was the story and everything else is fine. This, the story's great, but everything else seems kind of done. Now don't get me wrong, there are some real standout moments. In fact, I'll tell you my two favorites. One is the horse. This is one of the great movie horses. He's like the Javert of horses. It's just a great character. I could watch this thing forever. He just cracks me up. The other is the animation on the parents. Now that's really interesting because they never have a line in this movie. But holy smokes, look at the reaction on their faces. Look how torn apart they are. That is some of the best emotion I've ever seen in any animation, and it's all done without words. But still, that doesn't make up for the two main characters. And as I said before, they're not bad, they're well written, and they look great. I honestly just think it's the voice work. And even then, it's not horrible, I'm just always aware I'm hearing somebody behind a microphone. I'm always hearing somebody acting, I'm always hearing somebody put on a performance. And when you're constantly hearing that, you can't get as invested. So why did this film do a lot better as opposed to the last film about a princess and The Princess and the Frog? Is it a race issue? Could be. Is it because there's more guitar playing pop songs that can appeal to the general public more than ragtime New Orleans sound? That's possible too. But again, I think it comes back to my original theory. 3D animation. I think the film did well because the advertising played up that there was going to be more adult jokes, even though there weren't that many. The fact that the story, to its credit, was a lot more simpler than Princess and the Frog. And, like I said, the fact that it's 3D animation makes adults think that it's gonna be made for them too. So do I like it? Sure, it's a good flick. While the voice acting is distracting, it doesn't destroy the film. I mean, I'm with it enough. The backgrounds still look nice, there's a few genuine soft moments. The side characters are fun, and like I said, it's a great story. I guess for me, I just like the updates to the Disney formula in The Princess and the Frog more than I like the updates in Tangled. Somewhere there's a brilliant Disney movie here. If we took the story of Tangled and the animation and characters of Princess and the Frog, we could get something as brilliant as Beauty and the Beast. It's in there, I know it. But still, if you're looking for a good adventure that also has that fairy tale edge to it, Tangled's not a bad rent. Check it out and see what you can get wrapped up in.
Now that I see
come to the last animated film in Disneycember, Winnie the Pooh. Wait, didn't we already do Winnie the Pooh? Oh, wait, no, that was the Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. This is just Winnie the Pooh. Like, what? This is his biography or something? Or is it a reboot? Like a retelling of the original movie? No, they're new stories. I guess it's just sort of continuing it, but why don't they call it More Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, or The Continuing Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, or give it a different title like they did the other Winnie the Pooh movies? I don't know. It's here, let's review it. All your favorite characters are back, including Winnie, Piglet, Owl, Tigger, the whole bunch. And much like the original film, it doesn't seem like there's one coherent story throughout the whole thing. Well, kind of, sort of, not really, yes, I don't know. Okay, let me explain. Pooh is looking for honey, big shock. And in the meantime, he finds out that Eeyore has lost his tail. Pooh tells everybody about it, and so everybody tries to get a replacement tail for him. But none of them really seem to work. So they sort of leave that story for a bit, and they go on to another story. Pooh tries to approach Christopher Robin, but he misreads a note and thinks that he's been kidnapped by a monster called the Baxen. I won't dare tell you as how they came to this conclusion because, to be very honest, it's very, very funny. So most of the movie is trying to figure out how to capture this monster called the Baxen. And that's really about it. Those are the only two stories in this movie. I mean, it's done well, I guess, but why did we spend so much time on just those two stories? The original had like a ton of stories, and that was awesome. Heck, even if you wanted to keep it to just one story, that'd be fine too, but these seem very split apart, and even the way the movie is told, it seems like it's trying to recreate what the first film was doing. You know, a lot of fourth wall jokes with the narrator and just sort of taking time to let the characters talk and breathe and just have moments. But what made that one work is that it had a lot of stories. This one only has 2. That's very odd. When the film ended, I was shocked. I was like, really? That's it? Where's the rest of it? There's gotta be more stories you can tell than that. But to be fair, they're told pretty well. As I said before, the film does recreate sort of that feel that the first movie did, though just like I said, too few stories. But it still has a pretty good atmosphere and pace to it. John Cleese is the narrator, and he's absolutely perfect. He's both dignified, but can also sort of give that sense of humor that the original narrator had too. That's Craig Ferguson as the owl, and he's a little different from the original character. He's a little bit more obsessed, a little bit more full of himself. I mean, the original owl was kind of egotistical too, but this one seems obsessed with being right. Which I guess works okay, but I don't know, wasn't Rabbit already sort of that character? Wasn't he kind of the stick in the mud or whatever? I don't know, it works okay. The songs are really friggin' good songs. I guess it was done by the same people who did Avenue Q and Book of Mormon. In fact, one of the writers is actually the voice of Kanga. That's pretty cool. They're so good that I actually thought maybe it was the Sherman Brothers. I thought they came back to do the music for this movie. But nope, it's just the exact same spirit and the exact same talent.
They swipe your stripes.
They clog your pipes. They dig up your garden.
They won't beg your pardon.
They eat your snacks. They won't relax. They chip your tooth.
They steal your youth.
And now you know the horrible truth. The Batson, we're afraid of the Batson.
I guess if I had to point out one other nitpick, it would be, surprisingly, the animation's a little too good. I know, I'm never satisfied, but when you look at the original Winnie the Pooh, it's just the perfect amount. It's good animation, but still a little sketchy. Here, the backgrounds are still sketchy and they look fine, but the characters may be just a little too clean. And on top of that, they sort of gave Christopher Robin more human-like eyes, and oddly enough, I sort of like the dot eyes, which I rarely do. But I think because everybody else has them, it sort of worked. And when you suddenly see a character that has those big Disney-like eyes, it sort of takes you out of it a bit. Though not much. And again, it's a nitpick. I'm just trying to look for problems. The film is good. It has a lot of funny scenes. The characters are still wonderful, and it has some great songs. The biggest problem there is that there are only 2 stories, and I still don't get that. Why didn't they do a ton of stories, especially when it's called Winnie the Pooh? I mean, you can recreate this, you can have so much fun, and you only stick it to 2 stories? Well, to be fair though, they're good stories, along with good characters, good songs, and everything else I mentioned before. It's not a great flick, but it's a good one. If you're a fan of Winnie the Pooh, especially the original, I'd say go ahead and check it out. And folks, that was Disneycember. Thank you so much for joining me and looking over some of the most classic and memorable of Disney animated movies. I'm sure you got your own opinions on these movies, so get out there, share them, and hear what other people have to say. Thanks so much for joining me, and take care.
Rapunzel, sciogli I tuoi capelli! Perché mi fissa in quel modo?